All right, awesome. So, thank you, everyone. Welcome back to our conversation series. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amanda Devison. I am the first vice president of business and professional women here in Greater Moncton. Since COVID-19 has hit, we've really taken to having some conversations here on Facebook with some amazing women and organizations in the Greater Moncton community and throughout New Brunswick. And tonight is no exception. So, tonight I'm joined by Chantal Poirier, and she is the executive director of Crossroads for Women. So we're going to have a chat with her. But before I do that, if anyone has any questions or comments throughout this, feel free to post them in the comments. If you're watching the replay, feel free to post them anyways. I'll make sure that the question gets to Chantal so that she can get that information to you. And I'm going to give you her bio, and then we're just going to chat a bit. So thank you. And Chantal, first of all, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to give my little spiel here. Bear with me. Bask in the praise that is your Chantal Poirier has a business management and human resources diploma and is a born leader and mentor to all those who have the pleasure of working with her. From a very young age, she has held many leadership and mentoring roles. Her career began in management and evolved into career counseling, leadership development, human resources, and more recently as executive director of Magma and now Crossroads for Women. As executive director for nonprofits, she has gained momentum in encouraging a huge shift within our community and most recently with women. Her impact and contribution have been recognized at the highest level by being awarded by the Prime Minister and the Senate of Canada, the Canada 150 Senate Medal for her outstanding community building, and the Chamber of Commerce Inclusive Hiring Award, and most recently nominated for the RBC Canadian Women Entrepreneur Awards, specifically in the nonprofit category. In her personal life, you have a better chance to find her in the backyard with her 3 children, the 4-wheeler trails, or the yoga studio. She believes in fitness, mental health, and exploring our amazing natural beauty, and has coached local running groups, volunteered with Scouts Canada, and introduced mental health programs in the workplace. All of her decisions are carried out in line with her belief that everyone is equal, no matter the situation, status, or challenges they may face. She will guide and support them in a respectful and professional way. Her passion is to help continually build organizational structures that allow everyone from leadership to frontline staff to reach their full potential while genuinely feeling passionate about their work. Some may say that she does all this quietly with no need for praise. Her reward is the success for all those she helps. Whatever happens next, she's looking forward to it. So everyone, please help me in welcoming Chantal. Hello.
Wow. I was just sitting there thinking, I did all that. So thank you for that kind introduction.
That reminder.
Yes. And thank you so much for having me. It's such a crazy time, and these events are so important because it puts a highlight on, some industries that maybe are misunderstood, or some individuals may not really know what's happening on the ground. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Yes, so thanks for joining us. Again, we're trying to highlight amazing women and amazing organizations. Also, Chantal was one of our finalists for the 2020 Phenomenal Woman Award for BPW. So congratulations on that. And so I've had exposure to some of your great work. I've known about Crossroads for a number of years, but I know not everyone does. I didn't know it the whole time I've been here. So lived in Moncton. So I thought this would be a great opportunity, especially with all the increasing research and reports that have keep coming out about increasing numbers of domestic violence due to the lockdown and the pandemic. So for those people who may not know what Crossroads for Women is, could you give them a little bit of a overview of what is Crossroads? What do you do? What are your services? Things like that.
Absolutely. So first off, Crossroads is now hitting its 40th year this year.
Oh, wow.
In the region. So that's something to be celebrated in itself. Crossroads started off really small, like many nonprofits. And now we do have many different services. So one that everybody's really aware of and is familiar is our shelter. So we do have our emergency transition house, which is also known as the shelter, that we have in the Moncton area. So if mom and kids, or even just mom, by herself, does need somewhere to go, whether it be in the middle of the night or in the afternoon, we're there for them. So that's our emergency transition house. And then so from there, what we do is we offer programming. Typically, a woman who comes into the shelter, we say that it's a 30-day reevaluation. So every like 30 days, we'll reevaluate the situation. But what we do with them is we'll work with them as well. So we will advocate on their behalf, with either landlords or whether it be social development or any other organizations or partners that they need to tap into.
Mhm.
And we also create an action plan with them to get them out on their own and able to get back on their feet. Most of the time, it's more than 30 days. And that's
Right.
not necessarily because of mom or the children. It's and more so in the last year because some of the services can take longer before they're able to access them, right?
Mhm.
So, and maybe we'll touch on that a little bit further, what COVID has done for them later on. But
Yes, yeah.
so it's 30 days, but lately it's been more along the lines of like 90 days. We do have
Okay, wow.
some women that do remain in the shelter for 4 to 6 months, depending on what's happening. And so what we try to do is find them affordable housing. So we do have so we have the shelter services, but then we have our second stage and our third stage as well. So those are the ones that people aren't as aware that we have in the area. So those are subsidized housing that Crossroads is responsible for, transitioning the women into those units. However, we have very few of those units. So that's another challenge that we could maybe discuss further down the road that we're having and we're seeing now. But basically what we do is once they transition into those units, which is typically, an apartment, we have an outreach worker. So that's a program that we also have. We have outreach workers that'll work with them. So they'll follow them and try to get them back on their feet. And, whether it be light employment counseling or connections with, community agencies, then we help them out with that. We also have our Southeast Sexual Assault Center. So we're responsible for the volunteers that will attend or assist a SANE nurse. And we have counseling that does take place through a third party that we have also that is assisting us. So we do a lot of things. And I could be forgetting some, little things that we do, but those are like the biggest things that we do. So typically the community knows about the shelter, but not every other programming that we offer. Yeah.
No, for sure. Like the sexual assault thing, I didn't even have any idea about that. So, and is this area you service mostly Greater Moncton, or how does that part? I know there's a lot of shelters in New Brunswick, which was kind of another shocking thing to know, is that there are a lot of domestic violence shelters in New Brunswick. I know even Beausejour's in Shediac, which is not far from Moncton.
No.
So what is the area that you generally service, or is it just if a woman comes to your door, you let her in? Like, how does that?
So we are like Moncton and Southeast region, but the way it works is like the shelters are not very territorial, if I can use that term. So sometimes, we'll work closely with Beausejour. Our emergency shelter is the largest one in Atlantic Canada. So we do have a lot of availability, although we're running pretty close, like 80% to max capacity, but we do have availability to assist. So we'll often have individuals that come in even from Nova Scotia or Ontario, Quebec, and then other regions in New Brunswick. But just like we take them in, we also ask for assistance, in St. John. So we help each other out. It's not really territorial, but it is like the Greater Moncton area in general.
Okay. And what is the max capacity for the shelter?
So right now our max capacity is at 41.
Okay.
And I say 41, so that's 41 beds.
Okay.
Because we just recently expanded our rooms. We did have a big push for that before Christmas, and we're just waiting on our license to expand the rooms, so that would bring us up to 50.
Okay.
But with COVID, those rooms are being used anyway. We've just spaced people out, so there's no, doubling up or anything like that, and there's room to breathe. So yeah.
And is that 41 people, like women and children, or is it 41 families?
Yes.
Like, okay.
Yeah, 41 beds. Yeah.
41 beds. Okay. What is, I guess maybe this has changed, but so pre-COVID, or like, what was the funding structure? Like, where does the money come from to support Crossroads for Women?
So in general, pre-COVID, 40% of our funding came from government bodies, and then 60% was from the community.
Okay.
To really tell you what's happening right now, I'd say it's similar. So it could be 40% government, maybe a bit more, because we've been so blessed with some programs that have assisted us through these difficult times. Because
Mm-hmm.
we do rely heavily on fundraising events, and you know
Yeah.
yourself, like even, you know, n- nights that happen in proceeds of Crossroads, or
Yeah.
like if we do our
Yeah.
runs and stuff like that. And everybody's doing virtual events now, so it's very difficult. We're not seeing the funds come in like they used to from those events. So we have tapped into a lot of the government programs. So pre-COVID it was like 40% multiple government levels and then community. And now we're finding that it's a lot more like we rely heavily on the government. But I do find, and I have to point out, that the community here is absolutely amazing.
Mm.
Whether it be helping out with some construction and some manual labor for free to, any funding events that have happened in the past. So the past year has shifted a lot of our funding model.
Yeah, I asked that question because I know they did. The thought leadership at RBC had released a report for Canada,
Mm,
and there's the nonprofit sector is seeing a huge hit to their funding because, like you said, people aren't having events, so there'd normally be a lot of galas or dinners or auctions or what have you, and or just community get-togethers.
mhm.
Um, and you can't do all that and walks and runs and all those things because it's just so much more complicated now. And there's some nonprofits across the country who have seen like no donations in 2020. They saw nothing. So that's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's a red flag. It's a concerning thing to know that there's um, a lot of nonprofits out there who didn't get any donations
Mhm.
whatsoever. We know there's other ones where communities have rallied. So like at first there was big push for food banks and things like that. And then same thing, government kind of stepped in. But I was just wondering, trying to get a sense of where Crossroads landed on that, especially since there's been so much spotlight on, the
Right.
domestic violence with the pandemic. It's like,
So I think,
like you guys operate, I'm sure, razor thin budgets at to begin with. Then you throw in a
right.
pandemic, and all of a sudden the demand goes up. So it's like,
Yeah.
how does that all shake
I
out?
think that this year, if I can say, like, we've survived it quite well. And some of the community partners that we have that are nonprofit have said the same thing.
Hmm.
But what makes me nervous about that is that it's the government programs that we've all tapped
Yes.
into, right? So
Yeah.
are they going to be there next fiscal? And like our big funders, or even, our smaller funders or partners in the area that used to have these community events, are they even still around? Did they
Hmm.
survive this? And are we going to have these funds from the government? So we're doing okay,
Yeah.
but I'm nervous about the next couple of years. Like what's that going to look like? Because it's shifted everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the still the big unknown, is we don't know what all that's going to look like. So if people, like people that are watching, if they want to get involved, if they want to volunteer, like what are the ways people can get involved, I guess, with Crossroads? So whether obviously people can donate money, and is that, like, I think you guys have an option through your website.
We do, yeah,
Yeah.
for a donation.
And for donations. But what are some other things? I know sometimes when you're adding rooms, you'll make a call for specific items to kind of furnish those rooms. But can people volunteer? Like, what are the different ways people can get involved with
Right.
Crossroads?
So right now, thankfully, because we're in the yellow phase, we can accept a lot of volunteers. So we do have a couple of little projects going on, and they can contact us on our volunteer, either like the email that's online, or they can call us and just say, "Hey, I want to volunteer." There's also one thing that people don't realize that really helps us, and it alleviates a lot of stress on the staff, is even just cooking a meal, right? And you
Mm,
don't have to come in and cook it in our kitchen. If you want to use our facilities, you can, but we do have a volunteer who does this quite frequently. She'll cook it at home and bring it in, and she just she comes to the shelter, she picks up the ingredients from us, so you don't even have to
oh,
supply the
wow.
ingredients. We
Okay.
can tell you what we have in the freezer, and then it's basically the manpower of cooking for
Of
us.
cooking
And
it.
yeah. And lately, we're finding ourselves, sadly, with a lot of children in the shelters.
Mm.
So even if someone wanted to come in and maybe just do like an arts and crafts that they've organized, we
Oh,
also
wow.
have a bunch of supplies. We will gladly purchase them if someone wants to come in and spend time with the children. Obviously, there's a little bit of paperwork and background checks that we
Hmm.
have to do, but
Yep.
so it used to be that clothing or furniture or whatever, and that's kind of shifted too, to just the manpower. The
Right.
staff are tired. We're
Yeah.
doing very well. The morale is great, and we're taking good care of each other. But just the little things like that in turn helps the women and children, because
Mm-hmm.
then the staff are less stressed on like, oh, we didn't get the meal started for tonight, and they can spend more time with the women and children, right?
Yeah.
We also, have food bank donations. Sometimes we have food boxes that need to be dropped off. So we've started a
Okay.
program that we have volunteers that help us with that. So there's a lot of different things that people can do. And if they're interested, they can just call us and say, like, this is what I like to do, and this is what I don't like so much to do. And we can kind of figure something out for
Figure it
them.
out. Mm-hmm.
And we do have a big project coming up that maybe we'll touch on a bit later, but we'll need a lot of volunteers for that one. Yeah.
How many staff do you have at Crossroads?
So right now we have 19 staff on payroll, and then we're running at about 5 to 6 students at all
Okay.
times. So we do take a lot of students, like interns. We don't like to take too much more than that, because we do want to give them the experience that they're
Yeah.
there for, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But typically, in the summer, there's a bit more. It's from 25 to 30, but I did the head count today actually, and there's 19 on payroll. So
Wow.
when you think about the amount of women and the work that's involved, and even with the children, like, it's really not that much to say, well, we really want them to have a good meal, or yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So can you speak a bit about how did COVID change your world? So was there, like I said, there's been a lot of talk and news stories and research about the spike in domestic violence. What did that translate to in the Moncton area? Did you see an increase? Did you have to turn people away? Can you give a little flavor of what COVID meant in your world?
Sure. So if we rewind to March, April, May last year, when the full lockdown was happening, we went from, like, we were full beds to all of a sudden we had 6 people in the shelter.
Mm,
That's very
okay.
scary, because that those women and children
Yeah.
all of a sudden are stuck at home. And that lasted probably 5, 6 weeks. And, it's, no one was saying what's going on, because we knew what was going on, but it was very sad. And we'd get a lot of phone calls where people would just hang up right away because
Mm,
they're stuck at home. They couldn't even leave, obviously.
yeah.
So we'd have individuals that would hang up and have no idea what they need from us because they couldn't even speak.
Mm,
And then in June, things started to pick up. And, the calls just started pouring in, and
right.
we started getting people at the door. We were at max capacity. We do have, I forgot to mention in our services, a 24-hour support line and crisis line as well. So if there is someone who wants to call the crisis line, obviously there's someone that will pick up. So the crisis line was ringing off the hook.
Mhm.
And so we were running at max capacity, that we even saw ourselves a couple of times using hotel rooms to assist these women. And then it kind of started to even out for a little while. But what we're seeing is, I'd say we're like 80 to 90% full at all times.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that is because we like to keep that buffer at all times, to have that room for, the person
Yes.
that just shows up, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes we will use a hotel room even if we're not full, right? For that factor.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is there's an increase in physical violence and emotional abuse.
Mm.
So if we analyze, like, the stats from the last couple of years and the percentage, the physical violence is way more severe. It's extreme.
Wow.
And the
Wow.
emotional abuse as well. And a new factor that comes into play is that the abuser can also use COVID as a form of
Right.
control and abuse. And so, and I know people
Mhm.
hear this on the news, and this has been said before, but it's a real thing. Like, it's happening
Yeah.
in Moncton. And I guess, there's no end in sight for that. So we're trying to just be there and support the women and find creative ways of, like, moving them forward in their journey. What a lot of women we're finding too that are coming to us are very nervous about, okay, well, thanks for the emergency shelter and the emergency bed, but what do I do after?
Yeah.
So there's not enough affordable housing units available. So that's a real crisis in the area. So we're trying to work with landlords and other, creative ways. Sometimes we've tapped into Airbnbs as well. Like, just what can we do for these women that they don't go back, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So COVID has created some new challenges. Um, and honestly, we're just adapting and we're trying to get ahead of them when they do hit us like head on. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Like that just like that hit me right in the chest. Like for you to
Yeah.
say like for the violence level to have gotten worse. And like you said, like, and I've read tons of articles and I've
Uh-huh.
heard all the stories, but it's just different when I think, like you said, a lot of people, you kind of just put your head in the sand and think, oh, well, that's happening
Right.
somewhere else. And I knew from previous work I had done with Crossroads that, before you guys had expanded, that was one of the big reasons you had to expand is you were turning people away. And it's like
Mhm.
in Moncton, there's that many women being abused on a regular, consistent basis that the shelter has to turn people away. Like they have that many people. That was mind blowing to me and heartbreaking. It was
Yeah.
just devastating. So for me to like the thought of like, well, what does that mean for now with COVID? And so, whew, like,
It's scary. It's scary for the
yes, like,
women. And let me tell you a little story actually that happened today. And this kind of like I was driving home and I got choked up, and I'm hoping this guy is actually watching because it's a wonderful story. So we had a woman in our shelter who had been with us maybe 5, 6 weeks, 3 children, 3 beautiful children. And this little girl, all she wanted was a couple of teddy bears that she had left behind, and the staff pulled together, and like we just became very involved, and we usually do with some families,
yeah,
but some remain a little bit more reserved. And so when this woman found an apartment, and um she was moving out, and I had a construction worker in the yard, and the construction worker was just kind of talking to me about the work that needed to be done, but you could tell he was kind of observing what was going on.
hmm,
And when this woman left for the last time with some of her things, she was cheering and she was honking the horn, and the kids were like cheering and kind
yeah,
of like super excited, and he just
yeah,
stopped, and I was talking to him and he wasn't listening to me anymore, and he's like, "What's happening there?" I said, she's gaining her independence. She's moving
yeah,
into her own apartment. And like you could tell there was a little tear in his eye too. And it's
mm,
just like people don't realize that they read the articles and they see the reportings and they listen to people speak, but then they turn it off. Like even, this
yes,
event here. And are they going to remember that like this is happening in Moncton every single day?
yeah,
So I do really love when we have volunteers. Obviously, we don't want to expose them to everything, but it kind
hmm,
of raises that awareness in the area. And if you think
yes,
about it, we're the largest shelter in Atlantic Canada, and like we're running at max capacity. So if
yeah.
volunteers do want to come in and see what's happening and try to help out, like we will welcome them with open arms.
I thought it was great though for like the suggestion you gave of, cook a meal or come and do some arts and
Absolutely.
crafts with the kids. Like these are things that, people can invest some time and it can help just ease the burden of what the staff and kind of same thing, even with the people staying there. Like it helps ease their burden. It gives them a little more normalcy
Hmm.
in terms of like the staff can eat and the kids can make a craft and, just like normal things. But that's like a lot of times people get stuck in the idea of they can only help by money or items, but this is like something you could do with your time. Like if you like to cook, and this is something like you said they can do it there, do
Absolutely.
it at home, like wherever,
Yeah.
like you guys will make it work. So like that's awesome. So I hope people like take advantage of that opportunity.
And it's like I said, we supply the food, we'll supply the menu.
Yeah, like that's really
Like,
cool. That's really cool as
um,
well. Like it's pretty cut and dry, pretty
yeah,
easy.
all you got to do is put it together.
Yeah.
And like the women in the shelter, like they're responsible for their breakfast and lunch, but we try to give them a warm meal, either at the end of a work day or when the kids get home from school, right? So that's our goal and that's what we've been providing. But sometimes it's really tough depending on the day that's happening, right? For the staff to
Yeah,
do
for
that.
sure.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So you talked about there's some big projects you have coming up. So do you want to tell us a bit about that and maybe how people can get involved with those?
Absolutely. So I'm getting ahead of myself here because we're working really hard on this project and we haven't signed on the dotted line yet. But remember how earlier I mentioned that like affordable housing is an issue.
Yes.
And I mean, obviously we've seen the articles in the last couple of months, and affordable housing is a crisis in the Moncton
Yes.
area and in New Brunswick. So our second stage unit is not, it's not, it doesn't supply Moncton's population and
Mm,
Crossroads women. Like we just don't have enough for the women that come through the door. And that's why the shelter gets bogged down too, right? Which means
yes.
sometimes we turn other women away. So it's like a vicious cycle. So we are exploring with a couple other partners in the area, which I haven't asked them if it's okay if I mention them, so I will not
That's
mention
okay.
them
Yep.
tonight.
You don't have to name names. You
But
can come back later
um,
once the ink is dry. You can
right.
come back.
So we will be potentially, hopefully, opening 30 affordable housing units. That's 30.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
you heard it right.
cool.
30. So we're working really
Wow.
are falling into place that I feel like sometimes I have to pinch myself. Like is this for real? Right. And we've, worked closely with social development, and like
Hmm.
we've
Hmm.
approached everyone that we were supposed to. And it seems like the project is moving forward. So what that'll
Oh,
do is mom and kids, or just mom, have a place to transition out of the shelter. And honestly, when you think about it, 30 affordable housing units
yeah.
for the Moncton area is not unreasonable. Like, it makes more sense than what we
No.
have right now,
Yeah.
right? So
Well,
so
and the
that,
number of lives that are going to be changed because,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Just,
And with that, we'd like to offer programming too. Like, we do have
yes.
programming right now, but we'd like to have, like, if it is the building that we're thinking of, there's a really large space to have like amazing programming for the children. And like, so it just really, it's, the population in Moncton and domestic violence has grown to a point where that's what we require now. So maybe, 10, 15
Mhm.
years ago, Crossroads
Yep.
model was working, but it's not necessarily enough now. So
Yep.
I wake up at 3 in the morning and don't go back to sleep because I'm just thinking about it and I just want to get it
Mm.
done. But it's a work in progress. So that project there, we will require a lot of volunteers.
And what would that, in what way, like what would people be doing for
Well,
that?
anything from helping to set up the rooms to, if there's volunteers out there that are interior designers that can help me out. Like, I literally on Saturday was in the building trying to picture what this should look like, what makes more sense. I am not a contractor, nor I'm an architect. Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this, and we do have some volunteers that are helping that are specialized in those fields. But if there are any volunteers out there, like interior design, architect, any programming, mental health,
Mm.
it's going to be, we're going to have a big focus on that. So, there's other things that I'm probably not thinking of that when you're,
Is there like life skills and services opportunities? Like
yes,
if someone could help with personal finance and budgeting, or if somebody could help with, maybe giving some legal advice, or I don't know, like, do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Even cooking skills, or, do you know,
Yeah.
just life skills that maybe they weren't permitted to develop in their previous circumstances, that now that they're going to be independent, they would need those tools, I
Yeah,
guess.
the guidance too. So those are
Yeah.
like, they're programs that we do offer in our shelter, but on a
Yeah.
smaller scale. And you have to think about it that, like, when people are in this shelter, or like what we call a transition house, they are not necessarily in the mindset. They're not ready for
No,
that yet. So
no.
when we're talking about sustainable housing and affordable housing in those units, they'll be at the point that they've gone through our shelter programs, and then they're more ready to tap into, those programs that you've mentioned. So, um, you know, if you're thinking it and, oh, maybe I should volunteer doing this, chances are we need it. So
Yeah.
just reach out to
Offer it.
us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Offer it. No, because you make a good point. Because once people are in like the affordable housing units too, it's probably like they can see a light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas if
Exactly.
they're in the trauma of the moment, they're in a shelter, they've given up their own space, they're sharing a building with other people kind of going through a trauma. It's not really the time necessarily, especially if they have children. They're probably focused on trying to keep them feeling okay,
Yeah.
and less about thinking about if you can, you know, budget.
Yeah.
Because at this point,
The
you don't
future of budgeting. Yeah.
yeah, like what do you even
Yeah.
budget for at this point? So that makes sense.
Um,
Go ahead.
go, you go, I'll go after.
I just wanted to get an idea from you. There's like two more little things I want to be mindful of time, but So why is it, since there's so many shelters in New Brunswick and a lot of them are operating at capacity or near capacity, why do you think it's not really a topic of discussion a lot in Greater Moncton or in New Brunswick? Like, what is there something there that you think has caused people to turn that switch off? Or
Domestic violence itself, like you
yeah, in
mean?
terms of like, we don't seem to talk about, like, we're not like rallying it doesn't seem like we're rallying around it. It seems,
Right.
like I said, it's like a over there problem and not a happening right here problem. So how, I'm just wondering, like, and I don't know that you know the answer to this, so it's
Mm.
probably a larger societal question, but I'm just curious as to, like, Greater Moncton has a great sense of community and people rally around when different organizations need support, but it seems like this particular topic, there doesn't seem to be a lot of focus on it. And I'm just wondering.
I think there's many different layers to the answer of that question. One, I think that maybe, domestic violence 30 years ago, 20 years ago, was acceptable
Mhm.
to a certain extent, right? So it
Yeah.
hasn't been that long that like society has acknowledged that this is not okay.
Right.
Two, if I speak about Crossroads myself, remember how I told you we have 19 staff? That's like 19 staff total. So a lot of the focus for us is more on the residents and the internal. And like for me, it's my
Right.
staff too, than actually getting out there and like, hey, let's talk about this.
Right. Because you're in the weeds. Yeah.
Right. So that's why I love events like this, by the way. So thank you so much. I think we just need to raise awareness and we just need to keep like it can get very discouraging that you're like, we're talking about this. And then in 2 days from now, it seems to just have been forgotten like dust in the
Right.
wind. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's just important to remain positive and focus and just plow through it. Like I'm not letting go. I'm not letting this go. Um, I think people are afraid to talk about it because it's a very sensitive topic as well.
Right.
I mean, even ourselves, we see things every day in the shelter that are new to us or new to the staff, right? So it's very
Yeah.
difficult to hear it. So people will shut that off. And I
Yeah.
understand that, but I think we need to find a way to raise awareness without causing trauma. Right. So I think there's just many different things that we could say. I don't have the answer, like the 100%
No, exactly. Yeah. No.
answer, but I will knock on, governmental bodies and say like, hey, we need to talk about this. And I have
Yeah.
been in the past year. And I think a lot of my colleagues have been doing the same thing. So I think we just keep going and let's not get discouraged.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest one is that people find it disturbing to discuss it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Like-
It's an uncomfortable topic.
Right.
And we're living in extremely uncomfortable times right now. So, but that's, I think we've seen too with the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement that the only way, to the other side of this is through it. And I think that the domestic violence conversation needs to be one of those as well, that especially like, here it's a reckoning we have to have, and there has to be like a focus on it because dollars need to continue to flow so that, like you said, not only is there just the shelter and the emergency services, but there needs to be the support programs around that so that you can break the cycle and that women and children can move on from that. Because, the reason most women go back is because there's no way up and out.
What's next?
Yeah. And so you need to, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that like, I don't want people to sit there and watch the commercial that, bothers them or whatever. But I think that like, we need to find creative ways of raising that awareness but being delicate about it at the same time. So it's difficult really for people to actually have a conversation about it. Even like I said, the construction worker that was in the yard today, like he totally was not listening to me anymore. It was just like, wow, this is amazing. Like, and
he was having a moment for that woman and her children, which is awesome. Yeah. And then also too, like same thing about uncomfortable topics and things that a lot of people may not know about is um, there's a growing trend of human trafficking and
Mm.
sex trafficking in New Brunswick. Moncton is becoming a hotbed for that. A lot of people think human trafficking, they think kind of the snatch and steal and sell them somewhere in another country. And that's not what human trafficking is at all. There's a lot of it happening. Young girls are going out with their boyfriends and being exploited online and all kinds of things. And then they come back home.
Hmm.
Um, that's a lot more what seems to be happening is growing online. Are you guys seeing a crossover of that? Like, are there women that are suffering the human trafficking aspects from their partners or spouses, and then are seeking help now at the shelter? And is that new, or is that something you guys
Um,
have always seen, and just maybe the community wasn't
it
familiar with it?
it's a little bit of both. So it's not new, but it's increased
Okay.
for us. And I think the community was just, again, maybe not ready to hear it, right?
Yeah.
And to know that it exists. And, a couple of years ago, I sent an article to one of my friends who had two little girls, and she's like, well, that doesn't happen here. And yes, it does.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm the paranoid mom that if my kids are playing outside, like I'm at the window watching them, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I think what we're seeing more is creative ways. So I
Yes.
think we need to raise awareness. We did have a couple of individuals that came in, and they were 15, 16, invited to
Hmm.
parties with their friends. Then it seemed safe, and it was a friend of a friend. So they went to the party in Moncton. These are people in Moncton. So listen up, everyone. And like they're in the house, and then all of a sudden things get serious and turn bad, and they try to escape, and there are individuals waiting
Yeah.
inside the house to stop them from escaping, and then all of a sudden those girls aren't seen anymore. Now obviously they end up at our shelter because they managed to get away, but they're
Hmm.
even as clever as intercepting them outside of the house, where they went to a party with a friend who met a friend and knew a friend,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's very, very scary, and it
Hmm.
is happening in Moncton. And I think that's something that, if you think that it's not, then maybe there should be more education around that too. So we are seeing an increase of that, but also an increase of like clever ways of them getting around it. So,
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like for me too, when people are starting to have the discussion, it blew my mind to know, like, same thing. My traditional thought was, oh, these are girls that get kidnapped and sold, and that's horrible. But like to me, it was like that like never happens in Moncton or New
mm,
Brunswick or barely ever Canada. But it's like, no, there's a lot more of that's happening, and a lot more of even the ones where literally like the guys like groom them and manipulate them to think they're going to be their boyfriend or whatever, and then start having them do these things,
yeah.
live broadcasts online, and exploiting these girls. And that's horrifying. So there's literally teenage girls who come home every day to their parents, but while they were out
Hmm.
with their boyfriend had been exploited. And it's just kind of like blows my mind, like. And it was pointed out that it's a growing trend in New Brunswick. And it was funny when I learned that out. You start see the articles popping up and on CBC, and I was like, well, clearly I just had same thing, had the blinders on, because it's not new.
Yeah.
When you start reading the articles, you're
Yeah.
like, oh my god. But like,
Yeah.
so I was just curious if that was so it is
Yeah.
is increasing.
It's increasing. And, I won't give too much detail, but we are seeing a lot of interprovincial,
Yes.
women coming to us trying to escape it as well. So it's a huge issue, not only in New Brunswick in the Atlantic
Yeah.
provinces, but obviously, Moncton is, I mean, you probably saw the article, it's the gateway, it's the,
Yeah, it's the
it's,
hub.
yeah,
It's a
right.
lot of things travel
So,
through, not just goods
yeah,
and services,
yeah,
unfortunately.
exactly.
But yeah, I know there is still same thing. There are girls still disappearing in terms of, and they make them look like runaways or whatever, and they take them to other provinces. And I know there's tends to be a lot of gang ties and things like that happen as well. And so it's
Mhm.
kind of it's hugely scary. So, um, is there anything else, like, on that delightful note?
Mm.
Is there anything else we should know, or you want us to know about Crossroads, or how to get involved, or kind of what's going on?
um, so
Anything?
I mean, we've talked about a bit how to get involved, and my fears financially, 2 years down the road, and how we're okay. I don't like to use the word okay because I don't want people to think, oh, I'm going to stop help, like we're okay, but we're just okay. But one thing that we really didn't talk about, and I think it's important, and so is, and it's a small thing, but it can make a difference, is that the women need to know kind of what they're going into. So when they call the shelter, we do either they can come in for a crisis visit. So if they're able to get away, they can come in and visit the shelter and see like how that makes them feel, and if they feel like they can make the next step. And I do want to mention like the configuration of the shelter though. So the women out there who may be watching, who may think like, okay, maybe I could go there. Like we have 41 beds, but we have 18 rooms. We, have multiple bathrooms, multiple laundry facilities. We have 4 living room areas. We have a large kitchen. So, commonly when people think shelter, they think like this one big open area with all these beds or a couple of little areas. But what we try to do is, as much as possible, and if a woman comes in with her children, she gets a room by herself automatically because it's important for the children. And if we're not at max capacity, then we just, the woman will get her own room, and we dedicate a certain amount of rooms per washrooms for COVID purposes. So, it's just important because I know it sounds like a small detail, but it just gives you a picture of like, okay, well, if I go there, I'm not going to be in this big open room with a bunch of people, and like you'll have
like
your
on every
privacy.
TV show, every top
Yes.
TV show or movie
Yeah.
you've ever seen, it's a big like warehouse size room with bunk beds.
No.
Yeah.
That's not us. And also, I want every woman out there to realize, who might be watching and who's in this situation, that on average, it can take 7 times before you're actually really out.
Yep.
So if you've tried once or twice and you feel like you're failing, just keep trying. Like, and there's no judgment on our end. It doesn't matter how many times you've tried and you've come to us and you've gone back to your abuser. If you need to come back, come back. Like, we understand that. So I just want the women out there to know that it's okay. Like, if it's 10 times, 15 times, there's going to be that one time that it's going to stick, and we'll be there for you.
Awesome. Aw, that made me feel better. No, that did make me feel better after being the heartbreak of all the bad stuff. Awesome. If anyone out there is interested in volunteering, making meals, donating money, donating items, do they call the shelter? Do they message you on Facebook? Like, what is the best way for them to do that?
All of the above.
Any of those options?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We have someone who monitors our Facebook page, and I know Facebook is very common. So if they just want to shoot a Facebook message, that works for us too. They can call it, it's all of the above.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just reach out.
So much. I hope
Thank you.
Helped enlighten some people in the community. I hope that you guys get donations and volunteer time and meals and all that fun stuff, because it's really, really important. There's a lot of women suffering in our community silently. And it takes an extreme amount of courage for them to, reach out to you guys. And so hopefully we can kind of give that support to you and your staff and those women through just little things we can do, so that you guys, because you guys are doing the heavy lifting. So if we can do some things to make that load a little bit lighter, I hope we do. And I hope this brings a little more attention to it, so people think about when they're going to make their donations or give their time, that they consider Crossroads for sure. Because the work you do, you're literally changing people's lives, and you guys are, are in deep in those trenches with those women and children who are trying to get out. Like you said, it can take at least on average 7 times. So that's a lot. And it's very heavy. And I thank you for it. I thank you for the work you're doing. I thank your staff. I greatly appreciate it. And definitely, you're always welcome back. Feel free to send me a message if you want to come back, if there's more developments and you want to let our community know. Please do so. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we'll see you next time, guys. Thank you so much. Leave your comments and questions, and I'll make sure that Chantal gets them.
Bye.